From Playerbook Studios, it's the Quarterback Code podcast, where we interview offensive coordinators, QB coaches, quarterbacks, and anyone who can add value as we decode the most difficult position in all of sports. Please be sure to follow and subscribe here on Spotify and join our offensive coordinator community at playerbook.com.
One thing I tell my quarterbacks when I'm training, like as a quarterback, you have to be adaptable. So there's going to be adversity in every single game, every single situation. Just take the situation for what it is, make the adjustments where you need to make the adjustments, do the best you can within that scenario. And then guess what? You got to get ready for a new one the next play. So
in today's episode, we have a special treat for you all. This guest is considered by many to be one of the best high school quarterbacks of all time. He set North Carolina passing records for career passing yards, completions, and the national record for touchdown passes in a career. He was the Parade All-American High School Player of the Year in 2003 and shortly went off to the University of Florida, where he ended up winning a national title under legendary coach Urban Meyer, where he was the MVP of the BCS Championship game. I can go on and list his accomplishments, but I'm excited to bring my conversation with Chris Leak to all of you as we get into his unprecedented journey. In episode 1 today, we'll talk through growing up in his football family, being a sought-after prospect starting as early as middle school, all the way through winning 3 state championships in high school, being the top quarterback prospect nationally, and the pressures of the national spotlight as he made his way over to the Swamp in his 4-year journey from being a starter as a freshman, where he won SEC Freshman of the Year, all the way to winning his national title. Next week in part 2, we'll dive into his current coaching life, how he mentors and guides quarterbacks at all ages, and his systematic approach in doing so. Chris grew up in a true football household. His father was an NFL wide receiver, and his older brother was a monster athlete that had every college in the nation knocking on his door. Their father had them immersed in all things quarterback from an early age, but it's the mental side that his father pushed that really set the table for Chris in his quarterback journey.
We're definitely a football family. My dad got drafted by the Green Bay Packers. My brother is still, even today, he's a director of pro scouting for the New Orleans Saints. My dad loved to travel. Every Saturday we were at a college football game. Every Sunday we were at an NFL game. The most important thing that we used to go see that when the quarterbacks were on the field by themselves preparing. And we used to get there maybe 4 hours before the game, and we used to get in there immediately as soon as the gates open just to watch the quarterbacks warm up, just to see how they prepared.
From an early age, Chris learned football was more than just a game. Even though his father played at the highest level and his family was clearly one of the most physically gifted in all of North Carolina, watching his father run a youth football organization and being a part of it every weekend, setting up fields, taking down fields, chalking grass, putting out cones, gave him a perspective uncommon to most young athletes, especially gifted young athletes that were typically the best player on any field that he stepped on.
And my dad developed me and my brother through that league that he created, that he founded. And so you're talking about setting up football fields, painting field lines, running fields. We're doing all that. We're doing all that for all the teams. And so just right there, I understood. Just from lining fields and putting up end zone markers, you start to understand as a kid subconsciously, okay, there's a structure and there are boundaries to what football allows and to what you can do on a football field. And so even though I probably wasn't thinking about it, out there in the hot summer sun back then, you start to subconsciously start to think about those things, start to play a factor within your development and in your psyche as when you're on the field as a player. Those factors definitely help today for me and me teaching my quarterbacks. Like, look, here are the parameters of the game, just like a chess. Now, and this is one thing I'll get into later. Like all my quarterbacks, I make them play chess. That's one of the things I require of my quarterbacks, and because of the what chess teaches you and the mindset that you have to play, of seeing things ahead, understanding the parameters, the moves of the pieces and the board. So it's which is very, very similar to what you have to do on the football field as a quarterback. So,
as I had mentioned, by the time Chris was finished with high school, he was one of the top prospects in the entire country, if not the top prospect. That came with his own amazing recruiting journey. But imagine being an eighth grader and seeing the likes of Bobby Bowden, Lou Holtz, Nick Saban sitting in your living room, selling your older brother on coming to their school. This experience prepared a young, budding star for the process that he would take part in just a short few years.
My brother was the first one to get the quarterback gene. Brother was on a Pop Warner team. Pretty much, he was one of the bigger kids. Nobody could really throw the ball except him. That's kind of how he fell into it. And ever since then, and I kind of just followed my brother throughout those years and pretty much copied everything he did. I was the mascot growing up when I was 5, 6, 7 years old. I didn't start playing until I was 8 years old because my dad was really diligent on preparation and how we trained to be quarterbacks. So it was really important for him as far as the preparation. That's where that came from and has helped me excel through my career for years and years. But that's kind of how the quarterback journey started. It was almost by accident. It started with my brother. When I was in middle school, I was following my brother everywhere because my brother was being recruited as a high school quarterback. And so we went to 7, 8 summer college camps a year, every single year. Wow. And so we're sitting there, we're learning different things from different quarterback coaches, different philosophies. And being in North Carolina, being in Charlotte, there's that hub around Durham with Wake Forest, UNC, NC State, East Carolina. So Duke, we always got to hit all those schools just in our own state. But then my dad loved to travel. Every Saturday we were at a college football game. Every Sunday we were at an NFL game. And this is before there was a Carolina Panthers in our town. Yeah. So before there was a Carolina Panthers, we used to go watch the Atlanta Falcons. We used to drive to Atlanta, about 3.5, 4-hour drive every Sunday. Go, whoever was playing, we used to go see them play. But from 8 years old and up, I'm sitting there watching the Brett Favre of the world, the Randall Cunninghams, the Warren Moons. I'm watching all these guys warm up, seeing what their fundamentals look like, what technique they're working on, what their footwork drills are. So at a very, very young age, I began to understand the importance of the work, of the detail and the work that you have to put in to be a quarterback, and how you have to operate in that field to have success on the game field on game day. So growing up that way has really helped me mentally help and prepare kids the right way. My parents' household had 2 All-American quarterbacks in it, which is rare in these days. My brother was an All-American and I was an All-American. So that right there tells you how our household was ran. And But so my brother was the number 1 dual threat quarterback in the country when he came out. Seeing Nick Saban, who was at Michigan State at the time, come for home visit, Bobby Bowden, coach, you name it, coaches that you see, that you've heard about and seen on TV for years and years, coming into our home, sitting down on the couch, having dinner with us. I was only in 8th grade when this was happening. So I got a preview of what the recruiting process was like. I was very fortunate. Yep. My brother was a highly recruited quarterback, and a lot of people wanted Michigan, Notre Dame, you name it. And so all these coaches coming in, and so that really prepared me for what to expect in the recruiting process.
In the year 2000, there was no social media, no reality shows. Professional and college athletes were 99% of the headlines, as they should be, but that's a conversation for another day. There were only a few high school athletes that got national attention: LeBron James and Chris Leak. I can personally attest, growing up across the country in Northern California, Chris Leak was a national brand coming out of high school. With his strong foundation from his parents and his older brother, he was able to navigate the landscape of major college recruiting like an old pro.
Yeah, I won the starting job my freshman year in the summer, and
nice.
I threw. I want to say we were in a it was more of a pro style. My coach was different then. My first year of high school, we were in more of a pro style. It was the same high school coach that my brother had. My brother, if people don't know, my brother's 6'3", 6'4". He's 220. He was in high school. He was about 215, 220. So he was a big boy. He was a man's amongst boys, and so my brother was big on running the football, quarterback runs, option style game.
Mm.
Even though even though my brother threw for over 2,000 yards each season, he was gifted. He was a gifted passer as well. But my game being only 6 foot, being around probably in high school around 190. I had to develop my game a little bit differently because I couldn't take the pounding that he could take in the quarterback run. So after the first year, where I think I threw for about 2,000, a little over 2,000 yards, rushed for over about a little over 500. Once my new coach came in, Tom Knotts, who's now at Dutch Fort in South Carolina, which people might be familiar with on the East Coast. He really was my first person to really instill the air raid in me, and as far as throwing the football. I always knew I was a gifted passer, even in youth, even in middle school and youth, because that's why the offer in 8th grade came from Wake Forest, was because of my passing ability and my ability to how I thought about the game at a young age. And so I understood that me throwing the ball was going to be my ticket to wherever I wanted to go in this game. So that's why I really focused on after my freshman year of high school, and that's where the passing records and all those stuff started to come. Because throwing the ball 50 times a game back in the early 2000s, 2001 was not, teams just didn't do that in North Carolina. And so that was a big adjustment for everybody. And thankfully, I had a coach that understood that was my ability. That was my gift, was throwing the football, understanding coverages, reading defenses, making quick decisions, understanding option routes, understanding how to call plays at the line of scrimmage. All those things were factors for me being a successful quarterback. And I could do that at an early age because of the preparation that I had growing up as an 8th grader, and being able to watch so much football and be a part of those college football and NFL football on Saturdays and Sundays every weekend. So all those factors played into my development from a mental standpoint of being able to be successful, and have success early on.
No, that's awesome. And you've already spoken a lot about the mental side of growing up in the game. Everything from when you were just lining fields to understand. Most kids just go to practice
Yep.
and the fields are lined, and you're there for an hour and a half, 2 hours, and you leave, and you don't think about that. So you're already understanding that there's a business behind this. This is bigger than just going to practice for an hour.
Yep.
Then you get to middle school, and your dad's instilling the mental, and he's really pushing the mental side of it. Now you're in high school, and you find this great coach that's able to kind of work with you and bring out the best attributes of you, and he is pounding the mental side of the game with you as well. Now, you said he brought kind of air raid to the table, and it sounds like he's giving you a lot of freedom of really understanding the game at a deeper level and giving you more responsibility than maybe most kids would have in high school. Now, and I'm curious, how did he train the mental side? Is it like just like we do right now? Is it like rep it to death? Was he doing anything innovative as far as teaching in a different way or different tools? Like how was he getting into that with you?
I think the biggest thing that I learned, especially my first year under him, which was my sophomore year when I was 15 years old, was how the timing of the routes, the route concepts, the understanding, number one, that it's a concept. You understand the concept. If you understand the concept, what it works great against, what it doesn't work great against, what looks we want, what looks we don't want, like that was the big picture that really helped that my high school coach helped me with. And so understanding defenses, middle field open, middle field closed, like who's guarding the flats, like defensive identification was big on my growth my sophomore year in kind of high school. And I because I worked at it so hard, I'm not a lot like a lot of quarterbacks nowadays. Like most of my quarterbacks I train now, they play baseball, some play lacrosse as well. So they're 2 and 3 sport athletes. I was only a football player. I only wanted to be a quarterback. That's all I focused on, because that was what I was literally obsessed with the game, obsessed with understanding defenses, obsessed with trying to get better every week, whether it was footwork, throwing mechanics. That's just what I wanted to do. My dad actually tried to get me to play basketball or and tennis as well, because tennis is actually probably the closest thing I came to playing other than football. But I just said, I told my dad, look, I want to dedicate myself to the game of football, to being the best quarter. Because my dad asked me, before I even started high school, he asked me pretty clear. It's how good do you want to be? And I said, well, Dad, I want to be the best. They said, do you know what that means? Because I couldn't fathom how many high school athletes were played every year, and it's like, which is like 1.2 million player, 2 million high school football players every year. I really didn't think about that, but he broke it down to me like, look, this is what is going to take for you to be the number one player in the country, which I said, okay, well, if this is what it's going to take, I need to put all my time, all my energy into it, because that's what the goal I had. And fortunately, through all the hard work, my senior year back in 2002, I was named player of the year, high school football. So, and again, I tell people the way that I was able to accomplish that was just purely just the dedication, the time and energy and the hard work towards the sport and towards my position. And so it is possible for that to happen if you have the work ethic to do it. And it's purely hard work, no gimmicks, no shortcuts. And so that's something that I try to instill in the parents and players and coaches that I associate with, is that there's no shortcut. You have to take it step by step from scratch. And because this is tough thing, especially nowadays in our modern day age, it's a slow process. And a lot of parents, a lot of kids don't want the slow process. So it's trying to help them understand, like, look, you're not going to get this on the first day. This is something that might take you an entire year to understand and for it to come to its full fruition. But you try to plant the seed that, here's what we need to work on. Here are the steps to get to it. And here's the goal that we're trying to meet at the end of the year. So that me growing up that way, the way my dad has trained me and my brother, those kind of life lessons about being a quarterback has really helped me into my coaching, and just, starting from scratch, explaining it from scratch, and having patience within that process.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that's such a great point, Coach, in today's world. And I'm 44 now, and I don't want to sound like the crotchety old man, but like in today's world of instant gratification, and
Yep.
I'm on social media. I'm attached to my phone as much as my kids are.
Mm-hmm.
So like I'm not different than them in that way. But to really do something right, it takes time. And
Yep.
it's the crazy thing is parents know this, but they still, like, it's so hard for them to understand when it's their kid that's, whatever, wants whatever they want, or not
Right.
getting what they think they can get. So I just think it's such a great point to just stop and just emphasize, like, anything that's worth doing well is going to take time. And quarterbacking, as you well know, it's kind of one of those lifetime things that you got to just get lucky and be a part of.
Yeah, I tell them it's a lifetime. It's a lifetime journey to be the best you can be. It really is. And you plant seeds, early and often, so that they flourish when you want them to, in the season that they're supposed to. So it's one of the toughest things of being a coach, is like, you plant the seeds of, I planted the seed a couple of years ago for this kid, but the seed doesn't sprout until it wants to, right? As coaches, you want it to come now. And I want to be able to read defenses now, or have great technique now, but it comes when it comes. And that's one of the things that you have to have patience at the coaching position, and a great demeanor with the players, with also them understanding that there is an expectation, a high expectation for them to perform well. But there's that thin line of, this part of this game takes patience. This part I need to push them a little bit. So, and it's important. And I always tell coaches, like, the education of the parent is just as important as the education of the quarterback. And because when you're not around the quarterback, you want the conversations that they're having with their parents, whether it's at dinner, after practice, on the ride back home. You want those conversations to be going in the right direction, and not hindering the player from, being as good as they can be. So I tell them it's just as important for you to have these conversations with parents just as well as the players.
Oh, that's huge. Yeah, if you can set expectations early with them, you might save yourself a headache or two.
Oh yeah.
Sure. All right, cool. So we've documented already your amazing high school career. You went on to win 3 state titles, which is amazing. Set every record possible in North Carolina and some nationally. And so you're choosing colleges, and I remember because it was still in the days where it was kind of before all these, big everyone signing and
Right.
doing their days. And I was in college, University of Nevada, playing ball when Chris Leak was on Sports Illustrated covers, and we were so excited about the passing. And so you go to Florida. How did
Mhm.
you choose Florida, by the way? Was it I saw something you had a good relationship with one of the coaches, I think
Yeah.
was the
Yeah.
main thing?
Yeah. Ron Zook was the head coach, and yeah, my relationship with him um, was awesome. The rapport I had with him, because if it wasn't Florida, I mean, another Pete Carroll was at USC at the time, so I had
Mm,
grown really close with Pete Carroll as well. Carson Palmer, who won the Heisman Trophy my senior year of high school, was my host, and I had grown because I went to the Elite 11 in California. I really got close to him, and we spoke throughout the year. So USC was a huge was probably was going to be a close second in my decision making. And if I decided to go
wow.
to Florida, it's obviously being on the East Coast is closer to home. I really fell in love with the offense that they were running at the time, and which was air raid, which came from the air raid family. Ed Zombrecker at the
Mm,
time was the offensive coordinator who came from Marshall with Byron Leftwich, Chad Pennington. Everybody knows how many yards those guys threw for. So
yeah,
I
yeah.
was really excited about the opportunity to play in the offense that was fit for me. And that's how, and because of that, that's how you that situation. Me coming in that comfortable with the offense, that knowledgeable of the offense, allowed me to play well as a freshman, start as a freshman, and win SEC Freshman of the Year, which is a great feat that I have a lot of that I was fortunate to get, and just because of all the hard work that went behind it, I'm more proud of today probably than I was back then, because to win to win that award at the quarterback position in the SEC, as tough as
Oof, oof.
and I just found out this year that, like, the last time that Nick Saban lost a game by double digits was my freshman game when he was at
Awesome.
LSU. So yeah, so that was a quick. I didn't realize that was and that's what, some 20 odd years from ago. So that right there even, like, kind of solidified, like, you know what, the decision that I made, the hard work that went into it. It shows a lot of there was a lot of people around me that helped me as well, to get into that role, and it's helped me. I mean, even from today, just help players, coaches, to help them understand the process of what you have to do to get there, and you'll have success if you follow that process and if you stick to it, because it's not going to be easy, obviously,
Mm,
but it's also, there's going to be times where you don't want to do it, where you don't feel like doing it, you don't feel your best, but there's going to be those days where, when those days come, those are the days you got to push through the most, because those are the days that are going to be your defining moments as a player, coach, during your career. So
for sure. No, and that is such an accomplishment. I mean, the SEC, we all know, I mean, that's the
oh
closest thing to NFL that there is, even
yeah,
more than these, minor
I
league
learned pretty
teams.
quick. I learned pretty quick that freshman year, the things that you cannot do, as a quarterback. So yeah.
That's awesome. Hey, just take a beat on the process of being a high level recruit. I mean, you're probably one of the top 5 recruits that year,
Yeah.
if not the top recruit. How was it? I mean, it's not modern day, so it's a little different without the all the social media. But
Mhm.
that process of going through that recruiting, that's your senior year,
Oh,
and all these big time schools, wanting you to go there.
yeah.
Like,
Mhm.
I don't know, get into as much as you want, but I'm just curious, like, how that went and how you felt like as a kid going through all that. Like, was
Well,
it overwhelming, or was it
well,
just
I,
fun? Like, you're the man, or
well, I could tell you this: it's always tougher on the parents than it is the players. I can tell you that.
uh,
I was very fortunate. My parents' household had two All-American quarterbacks in it, which is
uh,
rare in these days. My brother was an All-American, and I was an All-American. So
it's crazy,
that right there tells you
crazy.
how our household was ran. And
Yeah.
but so my brother was the number one dual threat quarterback in the country when he came out. Seeing Nick Saban, who was at Michigan State at the time, come for home visit, Bobby Bowden, uh, I mean, coach, you name it, coaches that you see, that you've heard about and seen on TV, for years and years, coming into our home, sitting down on the couch, having dinner with us. I was only in 8th grade when this was happening. So I got a preview of what the recruiting process was like. I was very
Yeah.
fortunate. My brother was a highly recruited quarterback, and a lot of people wanted Michigan, Notre Dame, you name it. And so all these coaches coming in, and so that really prepared me for what to expect in the recruiting process. And I can tell you today, I was probably one of the first to actually experience as a high school player to experience what it was like being in the media spotlight. For kind of like
For
a year
sure.
round. ESPN.com, that my senior year of high school, had a camera guy follow me around every day of school.
Sheesh.
Uh,
Wow.
taking tests, going from class to class. So that was one of the things. Also, our local paper, the Charlotte Observer, they also had somebody come weekly, just take pictures of me at school. So I was constantly under the microscope in the spotlight. From that aspect, and
Wow.
I went on I did my recruiting visits happened during the course of our season because I took all my visits during the season so I could make my decision at the All-American game out in San Antonio at the time, and back in
Saw
2000.
that clip.
Yep. So I made my decision on national TV, to go to Florida, which was I believe it's in January, early January or early February, one of those days. But I know the dates have changed nowadays. But it's but right around that time, I knew I was going to make my decision sooner than the actual national signing day at the time. So I knew I needed to make sure I visited all the schools that I wanted to visit, meet with all the coaches. So my recruiting process happened really fast. My year, my brother took his time, went through and waited until national signing day. But I wanted to as quickly as I can. I couldn't enroll in spring like you see most kids do these days. But I
Yeah.
but I
Yeah.
was going to be. I forfeited going to my high school prom and all that stuff. I spent the money on going to spring practices every weekend at Florida, and which was really important for me because I wanted to start as a freshman, and I wanted to know the offense when I arrived on campus. That's that second session of summer school, which I believe was in July. So like again, it was I was all in to being the starter, to do the work and to watching the film, going through that process. So yeah, the recruiting process was tougher, I would say, definitely on my parents than it was for me because the late night calls, the thing that I guess for me as a player was the late night calls. So you stand on the
Mm.
phone with Bobby Bowden at 1 a.m., kind of, you know, you got school the next morning or a game, sometimes it didn't come
Man.
but it's guys like Bobby Bowden, it's guys like Nick Saban, it's those guys that you grow, Pete Carroll, those guys you grow relationships with, and you never forget it. I mean, you never forget it. And so
Yeah.
it was fun. It was fun for me. My parents were so happy when I was done that I made my decision early. So that they probably I felt the most relief for them than I did for me for sure.
Oh man, that is so cool. I mean, that is just like straight out of a movie, man. And I could just picture it all happening. So what a fun experience. And and you just continue to say my favorite phrase, man. Like every step of this journey, it's you're mentally like taking note and you're mentally like checking these boxes in your mind of like, okay, this is what I need to do to get ready for college. And
Yep.
I need to start going to spring so I can make sure I can win the job. Like those, if anything that these coaches can get from this is just how this whole thing is mental, right? Like your brother was 6'4", 220.
Mhm.
What are you, 6'1", 215 coming out of high school, going to
Six
college?
foot. I'm borderline 6 foot. I was probably 190 coming out of high school. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's like obviously you're uber talented physically. I'm not saying you weren't. I mean, there was only a few high schoolers back in our day that were on the cover
Oh
of
yeah.
Sports Illustrated, right? It's like
Yep.
LeBron, Shea Cotton, I
Yep.
think was one of the names, and you like, and so like, dude, I'm not saying you weren't
Yeah,
physically
I could.
gifted,
Funny
but
story.
it's amazing.
Funny story I could tell you because LeBron James, obviously, he was when I was a high school football player of the year. He was the high school basketball player of the year in
Yeah,
2003.
exactly.
We're all the same age, and actually got to meet him in Atlanta. We were both in Atlanta to do a recruiting show. I can't remember the name of it, but recruiting show. But he was on the basketball show and I was on the football show. But the studios were right beside each other, so I did get a chance to meet him,
Right.
which is pretty cool. To
Yeah,
see
yeah.
kind of because I kind of have that dynamic of being in that kind of storyline with him was kind of was pretty cool because I knew everybody kind of knew where his ceiling was and where he was going. So that was pretty cool. That was pretty cool to get a chance to meet him.
No, but I mean, but the point being, like, it's like nowadays you see eighth graders get offers every day on social media.
Oh yeah.
It's like, oh my God, what are these people doing? But back then, that's a lot for
It
a
was
high
rare.
schooler to have that type of visibility nationally, and I'd say probably internationally. You probably could go to Japan right now and people would remember you out there even probably. But like honestly,
I
like
can tell you what, gators. There's gators everywhere. I can tell you that.
I know, that's what I'm
I've
saying.
lived
It's
in
huge.
Canada. I've lived quite in quite a few places, and I have yet to find a place where there's not gators anywhere. So
Oh
you're
man,
right
you're
about
recognizable. So it's just a testament that you can stay focused as a kid going through that because of your upbringing. You were a little more mature. You didn't get, I'm sure you were like, this is amazing, what's going on, but you weren't overwhelmed by it. And so you head off to Florida, ready to conquer the world. And like you said, you did. Your freshman year, your SEC freshman year, right? Which is huge.
Yep.
And then, by all accounts, you have a great college career. Like you did everything that any college quarterback would probably want or need to put on his, trophy shelf. Got a national title. You played for some amazing coaches. The journey through it, I just saw this documentary Swamped. I thought, it was a interesting snapshot into that period of time. I was expecting because my age, I was expecting a little more crisp coverage, to be quite honest. But they definitely highlighted that you won the job when you did, and
Yeah.
kept the job even with Tebow coming hard, and we all know what he turned into. So yeah, I don't know, just maybe just some thoughts on the college experience. It sounds like
Oh,
to me it was awesome.
yeah. It's a lot of. I mean, going to a school like Florida was a home away from home for me. Um, I was I had a unique journey where I had two head coaches. Ron Zook was my
Right.
freshman and sophomore year. Urban Meyer was my junior and senior year. Three offensive coordinators, so three completely different offenses that I had to learn.
Wow.
It also shows one thing I tell my quarterbacks, when I'm training, like, look, as a quarterback, you have to be adaptable, right? And
Mm.
you have to, and circumstances are going to change, and they're not going to be perfectly fit for you. And so what one of the best things that you can do is learn how to endure. And that's one thing that my dad instilled in myself and my brother during the course of our careers, and just every game. And one thing he's always tell us, there's going to be adversity in every single game. And that's one thing that we expected. So if you're up 50 to nothing, the adversity will be, are you going to get complacent, right? If you're down 50 to nothing, then are you going to just give up, or are you going to keep playing hard and keep working, trying to get better? So there's going to be adversity in every single game, every single situation. Football is such a situational game, and it's such a game where one thing my dad used to always say is like, it's life on 100 yards, and it's situation by situation, and you have to take the situation for what it is and do the best, be adaptable, make the adjustments where you need to make the adjustments, and do the best you can within that scenario. And then guess what? You got to get ready for a new one the next play. So we learned to be adaptable and to adjust to different situations, and that really helped me through going through in college an offense that was really my freshman year heavily built on screens and RPOs, to my sophomore year where it was a lot more vertical passing game, play action, but also shotgun, spread, all those things, to my last 2 years I was just say my junior year, to where it was just pretty much spread option offense, to where my senior year we changed a little bit to more of and it was huddle. So and that's the other thing I have to also, my first 2 years we were no huddle, right? My last 2 years we huddled every single play, which is a completely different for me. Which nowadays I'm always a no huddle guy. I love no huddle. I love 2 minute. It's where I always excelled as a quarterback, because I can see it. I love calling plays at the line of scrimmage. It's what I did. It's what I did best. That was my gift. But I had to be able to adapt to call plays in the huddle. And my senior year, which was huge for me, was being able to call 3 plays in the huddle. And so that's where we got to where I call 2 passes in a run. And I get to the line, I have to check to the play that best suits for what we want. So going through
Oh,
all those
cool.
scenarios of those different offenses, I was able to learn just different ways to attack defenses, and it really has helped me understand. Okay, if I talk to a wing T coach, I can have a conversation with him about option ball. I can have a conversation about with an air raid coach or a run and shoot coach, because I ran somewhat similar concepts all through my career, and even my dad was a big run and shoot guy. So
Hmm,
growing up,
interesting.
so most of youth football, like watching Warren Moon with the Houston Oilers was big, or with I think it was with the Minnesota Vikings too as well during that time. But watching him was a big thing for me, just watching the run and shoot and those type things. So, but I would say air raid was probably the most prominent during my career, which is why I'm such a big air raid fan, and the offense and the Hal Mummies, the Michael Leaches of the world. So it's
Hmm.
that's kind of where I've set my home, because that's what I love to do, is throwing the football.
Yeah, for sure. And man, weren't those Warren Moon Oiler teams so much fun to watch, man?
Oh yeah.
Well, Hayward Jeffries. I'm trying to
Oh
remember
man.
there were some awesome ones back then. I think Webster Slaughter joined them after some time after he was with
Oh,
the Browns for a while. Man, those were some fun teams to watch,
yeah.
honestly.
I tell you, they did make football fun to watch every Sunday. It was you knew there was going to be a high scoring game. They were going to throw it, and they were going to keep throwing it some more. So yeah,
And
those
like
are
you said, the Falcons back then were fun to watch too.
yeah,
As much
yeah,
as I
yeah.
wanted to, I was a Niner fan, so we always loved playing against Dion
Well,
and
well, you're a
you know,
Niner. Well, I mean, I grew up. Joe Montana was my guy.
yeah,
You
yeah,
know, I
yeah,
mean,
yeah,
I read every book that he wrote, like every book that he wrote, that Bill Walsh wrote, I've read. So my fun when it came to fundamentals, technique, footwork, throwing motion, like Joe Montana, Steve Young, those were the main guys.
mm,
That my dad made me and my brother watch. And like still to this day, some of the things that he taught with Bill Walsh, being there, like, because everybody knows Steve Young was a runner when he came out.
yeah,
And he had to learn to become a great passer. So watching him, so I tell quarterbacks who are athletic. I mean, there's not many quarterbacks that are going to be more athletic than Steve Young was. I mean, he's one of the most underrated, I think, athletic guys that people don't give him credit
yeah.
for. Like, he was so
Preach,
athletic.
preach.
He was so athletic, and he had to learn timing and drops and reads and all those things. That shows that, okay, you can be an athletic quarterback and still run a West Coast air raid offense. So I think
Hmm.
that's a really big encouragement to coaches out there. Yeah, hey, if you have an athletic guy, he can still run the off. You just
Right.
have to kind of steer him in the right way. Kind of like Steve Young's. I would tell him to watch Steve Young, watch his career, and kind of see how his career progressed and the stories that he tells in his interviews, during his process, because one thing that I watch and one thing that I love to watch is interviews of guys, whether it's the Peyton Mannings, the Tom Brady's, the Steve Youngs, the Montanas, because they talk about their process and
Yeah.
how things evolve during their careers. So that was fun for me. And obviously, if they wrote a book, right, reading the books were a huge treat for me. I know personally.
For sure, for sure, and we've seen it, man. We've seen the evolution of quarterbacks over the years, and every about 10 years we get this influx of like athletes at quarterback, and
Yeah,
I'm all for it, man.
yeah,
I love college football. It's an athlete game, right? It's
oh yeah,
basketball on turf, but like in the end, no matter what phase we go through with the Tommy Frazier's and the Tony
hmm,
Rices and
yep,
the Wards out there in Florida State, like whatever, it always comes back. Can you throw from the pocket, right?
yep,
And Steve Young is one of those few guys that probably, mentally, just like Vic or any of those dudes, they defer as soon as they get under pressure, they defer to go. But
hmm.
somehow Steve Young taught himself to stay in there and like pass first. But then when he had to, he was out, right? And he could run with anybody, like you said. Like he wasn't 4'2" like Michael Vick, but
You
he
could.
had he had some crazy runs. Man. He had
Well, I
some
tell you what,
crazy highlights.
I had the fortunate time to spend a lot of time when I was up in I played for the Montreal Alouettes up in Canada, and my head coach was Mark Tressman, who was
Oh, cool. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
in the belly of the beast when it came to West Coast, Bill Walsh, Steve Young, Montana, John Taylor, Jerry Rice, all those guys, right? And also
Love it. Love it.
he was with Rich Gannon when they, were with the Raiders, and they were Jerry Rice, Tim Brown, all those guys when they were, just dicing up everybody, slicing up everybody off. And I got a chance to meet Rich Gannon later on down the road to talk ball with him. But Mark Tressman he really I mean, he literally taught me in the conversations that we had about Steve Young, Montana, and their process. I still remember today, he taught me about Steve Young. When he first got there, when Steve Young was there, like his reads were, he had a primary receiver, an alternate receiver, and then his run. Like those were his three choices. And he had to develop into it being, okay, you got a primary receiver, an alternate receiver, and an outlet receiver, then you can run. Right. So even people like Steve Young at the NFL level had to almost restructure his process of thinking as a quarterback. Mm-hmm. So your process doesn't stop just because you make it to the pros, right? Or just you make it to a certain level. It continues to evolve. You continue to evaluate it. And one thing that what Bill Walsh used to always say is that you have to reinvent yourself every year. That's one thing that I really take to heart. You have to reinvent yourself as a coach, as a player, every single year. You have to do the introspection, do the self-scouting, do the self-evaluation, see where you are, be honest with yourself, and put the things in line to improve so that you can meet the goals that you want year in and year out.
Absolutely. No, and yeah, Bill Walsh's book is amazing, and I definitely refer back to that. All right, Coach, I want to get into your coaching career and what you're into now. But just before we leave the college topic, I mean, you won a national title as a starting quarterback in the SEC. Like, that is no small feat. You had a legendary coach, Urban Meyer, as the head coach of that team. Any thought, like, I don't know if you have any good memories from that year, or maybe your Urban Meyer story. I don't know if you have anything that stuck from him along the way that might be helpful for these coaches, but any thoughts on kind of that year or last 2 years?
Well, yeah, I mean, obviously when you're winning, it's, you get to a point to where winning just becomes just part of the process. And your focus becomes on the process more than just winning, because it's expected. It's the expected expectation of when you're at a school like Florida. And that's where I would say Urban Meyer probably had the biggest effect on me as a player was the business, treating it like the business side of it, like the process. Hey, when you wake up, you're doing this. After you go to class, you're doing this. These are what you're doing in your time. And so the time management of being a quarterback was really where I think Urban helped me as far as like making sure everything was in line, because I had an end goal, I had a mission to accomplish, and these are the steps I needed to take in order to get there. So how I managed my time, and obviously this tends to happen when you go from an 18-year-old to a 21-year-old in college too, just kind of naturally. But he really helped me in that factor as far as, okay, what are you spending your time doing, right? Where's your focus and where's your purpose in every day? And that's where I would say practice became a lot more, almost more, I would say more important to me than the game in a sense, right? Because my preparation during the week and what I need to accomplish during the week, like the result that I wanted almost happened in the game like I wanted to, if I focused on Monday through Friday. So that was a huge part of me, maturing and growing as a quarterback, and making sure not just that I was prepared, but that my X receiver, my H receiver, my feature back, my Y, making sure those guys were watching enough film, they were getting enough sleep, they were doing the things that they needed to do to help manage them, so they could do better at time managing their focus and purpose day in and day out. Those are one of the things that I learned, that the role of a quarterback goes beyond himself, and that really helped the team, I would say, excel. That year was players like myself and other seniors on the team. Like, although we had our own thing to prepare ourselves, we also had branches out to help other guys, young guys, prepare as well. So that was a big influence on me, for sure.
Yeah, no, it's huge, man. That's awesome. Oh, real quick, those videos of those players like choking each other out and stuff, like, you guys are really doing that? This shit was real. It's crazy.
Yeah, mat drills were real, for sure. Mat drills were it's pure toughness. It's pure. One of the biggest things that I think, especially back then, that to make a big change sooner than later is to the psyche of your team, understanding the psyche of your team, where it's at, and what the expectations are as far as the toughness of your team. And there's really, I mean, people call them mat drills, and it's no, that's when people love, high school coaches love, if they still have the sport now, they love to get wrestlers, right? Because they understand the mentality that comes with being a wrestler. And that's because the wrestlers are usually some of the toughest guys that you have on your team, guys you can count on, guys that are accountable to themselves, to other people around them. They understand technique, they understand they understand process. So it's one of the things that that needs to be taught more of. There's different ways to do it nowadays than mat drills, but it's there are ways to build mental toughness, especially at the quarterback position, which it's almost mandatory that you have to have that at the quarterback position because of all the outside noise that comes with the position.
Thanks so much for listening to part 1, my conversation with Coach Chris Leak. Join us next week in part 2 when we dive into his coaching life, how he mentors and guides quarterbacks at all ages. Make sure you have subscribed to us here on Spotify and catch us on all of our social channels. Like and subscribe on YouTube. And of course, join us at our quarterback community at playerbook.com so you can talk with other quarterback coaches training their quarterbacks. And we'll speak to you next week as we continue on decoding the most difficult position in all of sports right here on the Quarterback Code.